Hello everyone, how are you? And my name is Mark and you're watching Noha's Narrative. And Noha's Narrative is a channel where everything feels real and something hides deeper. The silence that saved me the morning everything repeated. The silence that saved me the morning everything repeated. The smell hit her first. Cheap vanilla body spray and burnt coffee. Celia Hart opened her eyes to the cracked ceiling of her junior year dormitory at Whitmore University, and for a long, still moment, she simply breathed. Her hands moved slowly to the back of her head. No blood, no shattered bone, just the rough fabric of her pillow and the steady, ordinary sound of someone crying in the bathroom. She was alive. She was back. The memories crashed into her all at once, not gently, not in soft waves, but like a freight train slamming through a wall. 3 years of her previous life replayed in brutal seconds. The late nights she spent holding Bridget Monroe together while her own ambitions quickly gathered dust. The missed internship deadlines, the job interviews she rescheduled because Bridget had another breakdown. The years of convincing herself that being a good friend meant shrinking herself into nothing. And then finally, the marble staircase, the sound of her own skull meeting the floor, Bridget's designer heels clicking away without a single pause. Celia sat up slowly and pressed both palms flat against the mattress to steady herself. The bathroom door swung open. Bridget Monroe stood in the frame, one hand braced against the wood, the other clutching a white plastic stick with two vivid pink lines burning on its surface. She was everything Celia remembered from this exact morning 3 years ago. Perfectly curled blonde hair, silk robe she had bought on a credit card she could not afford, eyes wide, not with fear, but with the bright electric gleam of someone who had just decided they had won something. Celia Bridget breathed, crossing the room in 3 quick steps and thrusting the task forward. Look at this. Celia looked. Oliver was tired, the beginning of the end, or at least it had been the last time. She remembered exactly what she had done before. She had grabbed Bridget's hands. She had sat with her for 4 hours, patiently, carefully, dismantling the fantasy that Oliver was. Here, to the Voss property group would welcome a college girl into his family with open arms. She had begged Bridget to think clearly. She had sacrificed her own peace of mind, her own timeline, her own future, all to protect a woman who would one day repay her by ending her life at the top of restaurant staircase. Not this time. Celia let a slow, warm smile move across her face. Bridget, she said, keeping her eyes light and full of quick wonder. This is incredible. Bridget's shoulder dropped at once. The tension left her body so fast it was almost funny. Her chin lifted, a satisfied glow spread from her cheeks to her collarbone. I know, she whispered, pressing one hand flat against her stomach. I know it is. Oliver is going to lose his mind when he finds out, in a good way, obviously, Celia agreed. She stood up and moved toward the small kettle on her desk, filling it with water from the bottle beside it. Her hands were perfectly steady inside, behind her ribs. Something ancient and exhausted had finally gone quiet. She was not going to warn Bridget about Margaret Voss, Oliver's mother, a woman who had built her social empire on the bones of people who had underestimated her. She was not going to explain that Oliver had what his own college friends called a quarterly, a habit of cycling through women every few months and vanishing without explanation. She was not going to mention the non-disclosure agreements, the fixers, the private legal team the Voss family kept on permanent retainer specifically for situations exactly like this one. Bridget wanted the dream. Celia had learned at the cost of her own life that no one could take a dream away from someone who refused to let it go. They had to live it, they had to walk all the way to the edge of it and look down for themselves. I need a new dress, Bridget was already saying, pulling open her closet and dragging things off hangers. I cannot tell him in something ordinary, this is a moment. Celia, this is my moment. You deserve to look incredible for it, Celia said. She pressed the button on the kettle and opened her laptop. She had a deadline, a summer analyst application for Sterling Bridge Capital, one of the most competitive financial firms in the Northeast. In her past life, she had missed this deadline by 4 days because Bridget had needed her. This time she had already drafted the cover letter. She just needed to submit it while Bridget talked about silk and tailoring and the exact restaurant where she planned to tell Oliver the news. Celia uploaded her resume, wrote the final line of her application and clicked send. It took 11 seconds, 3 years of her old life gone, replaced by 11 seconds and a quick, steady certainty that she had just chosen herself for the very first time. The Hartfield Foundation annual dinner was held every November in the grand ballroom of the Prescott Hotel, a building so old and serious it seemed to disapprove of anyone who had not inherited their wealth. Celia had arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a simple deep green dress she had found at a consignment shop on Newbury Street. She had a glass of sparkling water and stood near the edge of the room, close enough to see everything, far enough to be easily overlooked. That was exactly where she needed to be. Bridget had purchased a ticket online from someone reselling their seat for $400. She had also purchased a dress that had cost her 3 months of grocery money. Celia knew this because Bridget had shown her the receipt with a kind of reverent pride, as though the number on the bottom was proof of her seriousness rather than evidence of her clap. When Bridget entered the ballroom, Celia saw her immediately. The dress was the color of a fire alarm. It was covered in sequins that caught the chandelier light and scattered it in every direction. The cut was dramatic in the way that suggested the person wearing it had made a decision and refused to hear any further opinions. In a different setting, it might have worked. Here, in a room full of women wearing muted silk and single strands of inherited pearls, Bridget looked like a Roman candle someone had lit indoors. The whispers started almost immediately. Celia watched them spread across the room like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Bridget did not notice. Her eyes had found Oliver Voss within 30 seconds of entering, and she moved toward him with the focused energy of someone who had been rehearsing this moment for weeks. Oliver was standing near the bar with 2 men Celia did not recognize. He was taller than she remembered, better dressed, entirely bowed by everything around him, until Bridget touched his arm. The change in his face happened in fractions of a second. Surprise, then recognition, that something cold and controlled dropping over his features like a shutter coming down. "What are you doing here?" he said, and it was not a question. "I needed to see you," Bridget said, smiling up at him. "I have news, Oliver, the kind that changes things." "This is not the place," he said quickly, glancing around. "It is absolutely the place," Bridget replied, and she replaced both hands against her stomach with a gesture that was so deliberate, so rehearsed, that Celia felt something almost like pity stir briefly in her chest before she set it aside. Margaret Voss appeared from the left as though the room had produced her from a crack in the floorboards. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and a face that had learned long ago to express only what it chose to express. She wore a charcoal gown and a single bracelet that probably cost more than the building Celia had grown up in. She looked at Bridget for a long, unhurried moment. "Who is this?" she said. Oliver said nothing. Bridget squared her shoulders and introduced herself with a brightness that was almost heroic given the circumstances. She told Margaret was her name. She told her that she and Oliver had been close. She told her, voice rising just slightly, that she was expecting Oliver's child. The silence that followed was not the shocked kind, it was the quiet of a woman calculating. Margaret stepped forward by 1 inch. That single inch somehow made Bridget step back by 2. You came to my family's charitable event, Margaret said, very softly, uninvited, dressed in that, to make an announcement of this nature in front of these people, and you believe this will end well for you. It was not a question either. Bridget's smile began to lose its shape at the edges. I thought you should know. I thought Oliver should hear it from me directly. What Oliver hears, Margaret replied, is decided by me. 2 men in dark suits appeared at Bridget's sides. They had been standing by the far wall a moment ago. Celia had noticed them when she arrived. Bridget had not. As security flanked Bridget and began guiding her family toward a side exit, her head turned, her eyes swept the room in a wide, desperate arc, and then they found Celia standing near a tall floral arrangements with her glass raised halfway to her lips. The look on Bridget's face asked a question without words. Celia had her gaze. She took a slow sip of sparkling water. She did not move. The side door closed. The price of silence and the power of starting over. Bridget came home at 6 in the morning. Celia was already awake, sitting at her desk with a cup of black coffee and 3 browser tabs open. 2 of them were research. One was a confirmation email from Sterling Bridge Capital requesting an interview for the following Thursday. The door opened slowly. Bridget stood in the frame with her sequin dress torn at the hem, her shoes in one hand, her eyes so swollen from crying that they were barely open. She looked like someone who had walked into the ocean expecting it to carry her somewhere beautiful and had instead learned what drowning felt like. She sat down on the edge of her bed without saying anything for a long time. Celia waited. They sent liars this morning, Bridget finally said. Her voice was flat. It had lost whatever bright electric quickly it normally carried. Someone slid papers into the doors of the hotel room they put me in last night. A hotel room. Celia, they did not even take me home. They put me in a room and sent liars at 7 in the morning. What kind of paper? Celia asked, because it was the natural question. The kind that take everything away. Bridget pressed both hands against her face. They want me to sign something that says I will never mention Oliver's name again. They want me to go somewhere in a Vermont for the rest of the pregnancy. They want me to give the baby up when it is born. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were dry now in the way that eyes go dry when there is nothing left to release. $2 million, that is what they offered. $2 million to disappear. Celia said nothing. They said, if I refuse, Bridget continued. They will make certain I cannot get a job in this city. They will contact my university. They will make sure every door I try to open has already been locked. She looked at Celia, then locked. She looked at Celia, then directly for the first time since she had sat down. You knew something like this would happen. Celia set her coffee cup down carefully. I thought it might be complicated, she said. Why did you not tell me? The question sat in the air between them. Celia considered it honestly for a moment. She had carried this answer for 3 years of a life that had ended on a marble staircase, and for the weeks since she had woken up in this room. With a second chance, sewn into her chest. Because you would not have heard me, Celia said. Not then. You are so certain, and I have learned that certainty like that has to run its own course. Bridget stared at her. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger, something quieter and much harder to name. What do I do? She whispered. Get a liar. Celia said, "Not theirs, your own. There are family law attorneys who handle exactly this kind of case. And $2 million, even with their conditions attached, in a negotiating starting point, not a final number. You have rights that they cannot simply paper over." And Bridget, she paused. "Your degree is not finished yet." "It is not too late to finish it." Bridget looked down at her hands. Celia turned back to her laptop. The interview confirmation glowed on the screen. Thursday at 10 in the morning. She had already mapped the transit route, planned what she would wear, and written out 3 answers to the questions she expected to be asked. She had not told Bridget about the application. She had not told her about the studio apartment she had quickly signed a lease on in Cambridge, or the savings accounts she had been building by picking up remote research work for a professor in the economic department. She had not told her about any of it, because this time her life belonged to her first. She was not cold, she was not cruel, she simply understood now with a quick clarity that only comes from having already lived through the alternative, that loving someone and saving someone are not the same thing, and that she had spent her entire first life confusing the two. Bridget signed the lawyer's initial agreements. 3 weeks later, she negotiated, with the help of a sharp young attorney from the South End, a revised figure and a clause that allowed her to remain in Boston. The baby was born the following summer. Bridget did not fight the surrender. Something in her had gone very still after that November morning, and the stillness, Celia thought, was probably the beginning of something real for her. Though she could not have said what, Celia got the internship. She got the job offer that followed it. She moved into the Cambridge apartment on a bright Saturday in February and stood at the window looking out at the frozen river below, holding a cup of coffee with both hands, and feelings for the first time in either of her lives entirely and completely like herself. She had not saved Bridget, she had not tried to. She had simply learned at last that the most radical thing a person can do is refuse to disappear for someone who would never notice they were gone, and that, she thought, sipping her coffee as light moved across the water was enough. Thank you so much, and please keep watching this channel, Noah's Narrative, and subscribe this channel, because this is the channel for you, and you are here to listen the real stories of life which can change your life according to the subject of this story. Thank you so much.